Hey guys, it's Bella. Welcome back to my channel. I hope you guys are all having the most incredible day. In today's video, we are going to be covering another Mystery Monday. It's going to be a solved case, and we are going to be looking into the case of the McStay family. But before we get into it, I just quickly want to thank today's sponsor, Maduri, for making this video possible. And I want to tell you about their sale. They're having their only sale of the entire year. The private sale is live at the moment if you are subscribed to their newsletter. And you guys know how much I love Maduri. So I'm very excited for this sale. I want to show you my absolute favorite pieces that you can get in the sale. I'm wearing them all now because these are just my everyday pieces. They're so timeless and classic, and they just go with everything, and they just make me feel put together. They are just my absolute go-to pieces. I just feel incomplete without them. So I have on the croissant dome hoops. These are the perfect everyday hoop. They go with everything. And then I have the chain necklace with the diamond letter pendant K for kebabs, obviously. Just kidding, K for Kerry, of course. And then I also have the round topaz necklace on. And for rings, I'm obsessed with rings. I have the daily stacker ring. I love this. It is just so simple and so timeless. I have the duo ring, and then I also have the diamonds team ring and the gemstone trillion stacker ring. So I will link all of these items in the description down below. So the public sale will be live shortly, but the private sale is on now if you are subscribed to Maduri's newsletter. So make sure you guys go and sign up for the newsletter so that you can get access to the private sale. Or if you are already subscribed to the newsletter, make sure you check your inbox so that you can get access to it. And this is Maduri's only sale of the year, so don't miss out, and happy shopping, guys. I'll leave all of the information in the description down below. So in December 2009, 40-year-old Joseph McStay and his wife, 43-year-old Summer McStay, moved to Fallbrook in California with their two young children, 3-year-old Joseph Jr. and 4-year-old Gianni. Summer worked as a real estate agent, and Joseph was an entrepreneur. He had his own company which made custom high-end water features, and they were a really happy couple who by all accounts were madly in love. They had a happy family, and they wanted to settle down and lay some roots and renovate their dream home. So Fallbrook was like the perfect place for them. It was known as the friendly village, and it just seemed like such a perfect place to settle down. And they really were just the perfect family looking from the outside. So how exactly within the space of a few months did this perfect, happy family disappear? And what happened on the 4th of February, and why did it take 11 days for this entire family to be reported missing? Just like with any of these cases, the 4th of February started out just like any normal day for the McStay family. Summer was at home looking after the children and overseeing some of the renovations that were happening at the house that day. And Joseph went out for a business meeting. He met with his business partner, a guy named Charles Merritt, who went by Chase. And they met at a Chick-fil-A in Southern California. Meeting went fine. Joseph went home. Joseph and Chase spoke a few more times throughout the day. And then at 8:40 p.m., Joseph tried to call Chase. Chase didn't answer, and that is the last call that anyone from the McStay family would make. Over the next 5 days, obviously friends and family did try and contact the family, but nobody was able to get through. Joseph's father, Patrick, had tried to contact him multiple times over these 5 days because he and Joseph normally spoke every single day. So it was weird to him that Joseph wasn't contacting him back or wasn't replying to his calls or anything like that, but you know, he wasn't too concerned at this point. It wasn't until the 9th of February that Joseph's business partner Chase contacted Joseph's brother Michael and said, look, I haven't been able to get in contact with him since the 4th of February. I'm really concerned. And that's when Michael spoke to his family, and they realized that the family was actually missing. Despite this revelation though, nobody reported them missing. They were all kind of trying to stay optimistic because they were just hoping that maybe they had gone on a little family getaway and just had forgotten to tell anybody, and maybe they had no reception, or they were just enjoying themselves because, you know, the McStay family were inclined inclined to go on a little family trip every now and then. So they were just kind of crossing their fingers. They didn't report them missing. They were hoping they would get back and be like, hey, sorry, you know, we've just been away for a little while. I mean, despite the fact that they were trying to stay optimistic though, obviously there were some concerns. Joseph's mother, Susan, asked Joseph's business partner, Chase, to go and check the house to see if there was like anything sort of out of the ordinary, if anything seemed weird. And everything seemed to be pretty normal, aside from the fact that the McStay family's 2 dogs were locked outside. And this is really out of character because they are not the sort of people who are just gonna abandon their dogs or leave their dogs behind with nobody to look after them, no way for them to get food and water and all of that sort of thing. So it was definitely out of character. And then the very next day, a concerned like neighbor or acquaintance or something actually called for a welfare check on the McStay family's house. So the police went out to the house and had a look around, and they didn't find anything suspicious or out of the ordinary or weird looking either. A few days later, on the 13th of February, so 9 days after anybody has heard from anyone from the McStay family, Joseph's mother, Susan, is getting really concerned. And so she tells Joseph's brother, Michael, to go to the house and to find a way to get inside and look inside and figure out what is going on. And so Michael takes the business partner, Chase, with him, and they actually know a way to get into the house through like an unlocked window or something. So they get inside and the house is a mess. There's like rotting food left on the counters. There's clothes everywhere. It's in disarray. And so it's clear that they had left really abruptly. They were in a rush to get out of that house. And what's weird about this to me is that it's been 9 days since anyone has heard from anyone from the family. And obviously people have been calling them, messaging them, and have not heard back. And so 9 days of this, and nobody, like they're only just now checking inside the house. They still haven't reported them missing, which is so bizarre to me. Like apparently after getting in the house, Chase was like, we should call the sheriff's department. And Micah was like, little rash there, like let's hold off on doing that. And apparently his reasoning for this was that after 10 days of someone being missing, that's when they call in the homicide squad. I mean, that logic isn't really computing for me. I don't know. I think they were trying to be optimistic. They were hoping for the best. Maybe they just didn't want to come to terms with what they kind of knew was happening and what they knew was going on, and they were prolonging the inevitable. I don't know what the deal was, but it just seems a little strange to me that 9 days and they've only just gotten into the house. 9 days and nobody's reported them missing. So a couple days later, it's now the 15th of February. It's been 11 days since anybody has heard from anyone from the McStay family. And finally, Joseph's brother, Michael, contacts the sheriff's department to report the family missing. And a couple of officers meet them at the McStay family house. And they don't consider it a crime scene. They can't enter at this time because they need to get a search warrant, which is something that would take 4 days. But they just, they don't consider it a crime scene. They're not really concerned because there's no signs of forced entry, no real signs of foul play, even though they can't see inside the house. So I don't know how they could have determined that at that time. But to me, it's like, okay, maybe there's no signs of forced entry or signs of foul play on the outside, but is it not cause for concern that none of their friends, family, nobody has heard from an entire family in 11 days? That is not cause for concern? I don't know. But anyway, at the same time, the case actually ended up getting handed over to the homicide squad because it's been 11 days. And after 10 days of someone being missing, it gets handed over to the homicide squad, I guess. So like I said, the search warrant was going to take 4 days for that to be issued. And so in the meantime, investigators actually gave permission to Joseph's mother, Susan, and brother Michael to enter the McStay family home to clean up, which is weird to me. Like, they're allowing these people into the house to clean it up. Like, this could potentially be a crime scene, and that would be considered like contaminating a crime scene to have people in there before the police go in there, moving stuff around. I don't know. Really bizarre to me, and I'm not sure why Susan and Michael wanted to clean it up, maybe in case they came home, or maybe because they kind of wanted to start their own investigation, because Susan got all of the rotting food and she like threw that out, cleaned up a bit, and Michael took Joseph's laptop and SD card, and he took that home with him, which again, I cannot believe the police allowed this, but he took it home, and I guess that was to kind of start their investigation, maybe look on the computer to see if there was anything that would indicate maybe where the family had gone. He was instructed by investigators to return any items that he took before the search warrant was issued, which he did do. He did return them, but it just seems bizarre to me that this was even allowed, because this could contaminate evidence. It could potentially have allowed evidence to be destroyed. It just seems like a really weird kind of move for the police to allow. Anyway, now while they're still waiting for this search warrant to be issued, they are doing a little bit of digging, and they actually find that the McStay family's neighbor has a security camera which picked up footage of the family's white Isuzu SUV leaving the family home at 7:47 p.m. So this is sort of the first evidence, like piece of evidence there is in this case, and it's not really a lot to go off, but Joseph's family is getting really concerned because everything now is pointing to the fact that they have been taken against their will. The fact that they were leaving that late at night, like they have 2 young children, so it's really out of the ordinary for them to leave at almost 8 p.m. at night without telling anybody. The house was left in a total mess. There was rotting food that was left all over the counters. You know, they left their dogs locked outside, which is really out of character for them. And there was even like really important things that had been left at the home, like the kids' strollers, prescription glasses, that sort of thing. Finally, by the 19th of February, they get the search warrant. Investigators go in and search the McStay family house, and again, they find no signs of forced entry, no signs of foul play, and so their next step is to put a report out for the missing family vehicle, the white Isuzu SUV, and it wasn't long before they actually got word that the car had been towed and impounded from a shopping mall very close to the Mexican border. And I'm sure you guys know exactly what the police said as soon as they found the car near the Mexico border. They were like, well, they've just fled to Mexico, which, I mean, what are they fleeing from? I don't know, because there's nothing suspicious going on with this family whatsoever, but they've fled to Mexico apparently, and they have ditched all of their family and friends, cut off all contact with everyone, and just, for whatever reason, made themselves disappear, is the running theory from the police, which of course Joseph's family are not buying whatsoever. Joseph's mum Susan even said in an interview that there is no way that they left willingly. Soon after finding the car, they also found evidence on the computer, on one of the computers, which showed Google searches from a week before the disappearance, looking up how to obtain documentation to enter Mexico. Now, despite the fact that investigators were running with the theory that the family had kind of run away to Mexico, they were still continuing their investigation, and they went ahead and they interviewed pretty much all of the employees at Joseph's company, and most notably they interviewed Chase Merritt, the business partner we've already spoken about, and then also a guy named Dan Kavanagh. He was a very early employee of the company, and he helped Joseph with the website and all of the technical side of things in the business. And the business itself actually was really successful. Like, it was bringing in a lot of money, and in interviews after the family disappeared, associates revealed that it was valued at near $1 million. Investigators also took DNA samples from a bunch of their, potential suspects, and then on the 23rd of February, so 19 days after the family went missing, they also told Interpol to be on the look for the McStay family. On the 5th of March, investigators got what they thought was a major breakthrough in the case when they obtained CCTV footage from the Mexico border, and it showed like a really super blurry image of a family of 4 who could potentially be the McStay family walking through the border checkpoint, and it was dated for the 8th of February and was captured around 7 p.m. And this CCTV, you guys, like, it really is so blurry. This could be anyone. You cannot see their faces. They're kind of walking away from the footage as well, so it's like the back of their heads, and it's just impossible to tell if it was actually them. This could be any family of 4 with 2 young children. And not even to mention the fact that this footage is from the 8th of February, so this is 4 days after anybody heard from them last, 4 days after the footage of the family car leaving the family home, so it it just kind of, the timeline doesn't really add up. Obviously though, after finding this CCTV footage, investigators kind of stopped investigating because they were like, that's them, it all makes sense, you know, they've fled to Mexico, sorry about it. And then there were also apparently kind of a couple of sightings of the family in Mexico as well. So that was kind of it for them, right? But the family did not believe this one bit. Like, they did not believe that was them in the footage. They didn't believe that they had fled to Mexico. Joseph's business partner Chase said that he didn't believe that was Joseph in the footage because Joseph had a very distinct walk. He didn't walk like the guy in that CCTV footage. And Joseph's father, Patrick, also didn't believe that it was them because, you know, they weren't caught on any other CCTV in the area, but it was a busy area with a lot of surveillance. So surely if it was them, they would have popped up on one of the other cameras, but they didn't. And so he was getting concerned that the investigators had kind of wiped their hands of the case. They were chasing a dead lead, believing they had fled to Mexico when nobody else besides investigators believed that they had fled to Mexico. And so Patrick felt like he kind of had to start his own investigation, and he called his friend, a guy named Tim Miller, a friend from Texas, who had started and founded a non-profit search and rescue organization. And so Tim and investigative journalist Steph Watts teamed up and they went out to the family home, and they were baffled that the home hadn't been considered a crime scene and that people had been allowed inside. They did have their own look inside and didn't find anything out of the ordinary, but they were suspicious and obviously feared the worst. By April, the FBI became involved in the search, and they basically were kind of just lending resources to help try and locate the family in Mexico, because that's really what the investigation was at this point. Like, the investigators believed that they were in Mexico, and so like they had fled to Mexico, and so the whole investigation was basically trying to locate them in Mexico, to be like, well, you know, see, we were right, like they just left, you guys. And years passed and they never located the family in Mexico. And by 2013, the case was officially like fully handed over to the FBI. Obviously, in a case like this where there's no major evidence, there's no bodies, like there really is nothing, these people just kind of disappeared into thin air. There was obviously a lot of speculation and some pretty outlandish theories. There was one theory that Joseph was involved in a cartel and that's why all of this happened, but there was literally zero evidence to back this up. Another theory that was pushed by an author named Rick Baker was that Summer had killed Joseph and then fled with the children, and he even speculated that she had like somehow doctored this CCTV footage to kind of like throw investigators off and make them think that she hadn't killed Joseph and that they had all just kind of gone to Mexico, which, I mean, that would be some high-tech stuff going on, like to doctor CCTV footage from the border. Rick Baker actually also wasn't the only one who speculated and pushed this theory. There was a lot of speculation about Summer and Joseph's relationship. Some people said that, you know, in the weeks before the family's disappearance, that Joseph had this kind of mysterious illness where he was dizzy all of the time and wasn't feeling very well, and so there was some speculation that Summer might have been poisoning him in the lead up to his death and then, you know, eventually killed him. Another bit of information that contributed to this theory is that Joseph actually had a son from a previous relationship named Jonah, and he was a great dad. You know, he still made a lot of time for Jonah and would go and see him very often. And Chase, you know, Joseph's business partner, claimed that Summer didn't like that she felt that him going and making time for Jonah was taking time away for their two children that they had together. And Chase also claimed that Summer had a lot of problems. Joseph's parents, on the other hand, Patrick and Susan, they absolutely did not believe this. They didn't believe any of what Chase was saying. They did not think that Summer had anything to do with it, and they refuted the idea that she had been poisoning Joseph. So like I said, it's been 4 years now. We're in 2013, the family disappeared in 2009, and the case has pretty much well and truly gone cold, and nobody knows what happened to them. There's no new evidence evidence that's come out, which I cannot imagine how that would have felt for the family. They have no closure. They would still be holding on to hope that, they're out there and they're alive. But then on the 11th of November in 2013 at 9:58 a.m., a call came into 911 from a motorcyclist who found what they believed was a human skull in the Mojave Desert, and the sheriff's department immediately went out to investigate the site, and that's where they found 2 shallow graves containing the bodies of 2 adults and 2 children, and also a sledgehammer, which was believed to have been the murder weapon. Now, because these remains were completely decomposed, these were just skeletal remains at this point, they had to use dental records to identify the victims, which took 4 days. So on the 15th of November in 2013, the adult remains were positively identified as that of Summer and Joseph McStay, and based on that information, they assumed that the 2 children were their children, Joseph Jr. and Gianni, who were 3 and 4 years old, might I add. They found this sledgehammer with them, which is suspected of being the murder weapon. And so some sicko murdered not only an entire family, but 3 and 4-year-old children with a sledgehammer. It's just psychopathic and horrific. It's actually sick that there are people out there who are capable of something like that. So once the victims were identified, the McStay family case was handed over to the San Bernardino Sheriff's Department because they held jurisdiction over the area of the gravesite where the remains were found. And so the first thing that they did was they performed a thorough analysis of the family's white Isuzu SUV, and they actually found DNA evidence from Chase Merritt in the car, which, if you remember, is the business partner I've mentioned a few times. And I don't know how the first investigators didn't see this or didn't gather this DNA evidence from the car. Maybe because they were just so set on the fact that the family had fled to Mexico that they just didn't do a thorough enough examination. But before they thought that they had fled to Mexico, they obviously had looked into a few suspects, as I mentioned, took some DNA from a couple of people, and Chase was one of those initial suspects. So they had taken his DNA, they did give him a lie detector test, but that was kind of the extent of it because they just had no reason to believe he was involved. They didn't really suspect foul play. And then obviously they found the car near the border and they just kind of dropped it all. And they were like, they've just gone themselves. Now, one thing that was kind of lucky about the area of the gravesite is that it's in a remote desert location that is not traveled very often, and so evidence is preserved, evidence like tire tracks that were found there, and these tire tracks were a match to the tires on Chase's truck. It also came out that Chase was actually very knowledgeable of the Mojave Desert because he spent a lot of time there as a kid. His sister lived actually really close to the site, and investigators were also able to get a hold of his cell phone records, which placed him in the area of the gravesite. Police are certain they've got their guy. They've got the DNA, the tire tracks, the phone records, the fact that he was knowledgeable about the area that the gravesites were located. And then on top of all of that, it comes out that there's a lot of stuff that was going on around the time of the disappearance and murders that painted Chase in a really bad light. He was going through some financial issues, and obviously, as I had mentioned earlier, Joseph's business was doing really well, and Chase himself said that it was projected to do over $1.5 million in sales in 2010, and Chase wasn't really seeing a lot of the return of that because he was really just terrible with his money, obviously, and he had to ask Joseph to borrow money off him multiple times, so much so that they actually had to have a spreadsheet to keep track of all the times that he had borrowed money from Joseph. Dan Kavanagh, one of Joseph's business associates, said that he believed that the total amount Chase may have owed to Joseph was around the $20,000 mark, but there's a lot of conflicting reports about how much Chase actually owed. Another business associate named Gina Watson believes that it may have even been around the $100,000 mark because, it's really hard to keep track of because every time a customer was unhappy or issued a chargeback, Joseph just copped it because he had already paid Chase, and he knew that Chase was going through financial struggles, so he didn't ask Chase to pay back that money, even though the chargebacks or the unhappy customers were due to Chase's kind of bad work. Now, this and Chase's other financial shortcomings weren't actually discovered until after the remains were found, and they, after this point discovered that Chase had actually forged checks in Joseph's name the night that the family disappeared, and also after the family was murdered. After he murdered the family, he continued to forge checks in Joseph's name to himself. It also came out that he had a criminal record which dated back 40 years, which included trespassing and burglary. As it turns out, there were also some inconsistencies in Chase's story. So he was obviously the one that gave the police the story about him meeting up with Joseph at Chick-fil-A the day that Joseph and the McStay family disappeared. And it turns out that Joseph and Chase had actually gotten into a major argument at Chick-fil-A, which was eventually resolved, but the argument was over a massive chargeback that they had gotten for a fountain that was faulty. And so Joseph was angry because Chase is the one who installs the water fountains and that sort of thing, and so he wanted Chase to go and resolve the issue or fix the water fountain or give him some money back, obviously, because he's the one that kind of messed it up. On the 5th of November in 2014, Chase, or Charles Merritt, was arrested and charged with 4 counts of murder. After the arrest and everything came out about Chase, Joseph's father Patrick also recalled conversations that he had with Joseph about Chase in the year before Joseph's death, and apparently Joseph was really unhappy with Chase and with his work, and he was considering cutting him out of the business. He was considering hiring another welder to kind of make Chase more competitive and make him perform better. Ultimately, though, Patrick believed that Chase's motive was money-related issues. Obviously, he owed a lot of money to Joseph, but he also had a major gambling problem, and he owed a lot of money to casinos as well. So what allegedly happened on the 4th of February is that Joseph found out about what Chase was doing, and he threatened to report him to the police for embezzlement. And California has a 3-strike rule. So basically Chase would have been in a lot of trouble. They got into a very heated argument. So he allegedly went to the McStay house on the evening of the 4th of February in a fit of rage and desperation, and he killed the entire family. He then cleaned up and held the bodies for 2 days before driving them to the Mojave Desert to dispose of the bodies, and he buried them on the 6th of February, which is when his phone was pinged in the area. After this, he drove back to the McStay family house and he took the family's SUV to the border. And it's also alleged that he was the one searching the Mexico-related searches on the family's computer. Unfortunately, though, it is hard to know exactly what happened on the 4th of February because he's always pled his innocence. So he was charged with 4 counts of murder and was facing the death penalty. And before the case could even go to trial, there were heaps of delays, and he fired at least 5 attorneys and also started claiming that he was dying from congestive heart failure, which was later proven to be false. He tried to represent himself, and it seemed like he was just trying to prolong the whole situation, prevent it from going to trial or prolong it before it went to trial. But the trial did end up beginning on the 7th of January in 2019, and it just, there was no way that he was going to make this an easy trial, despite the fact that he was the only suspect, he was the only person with ties to the graveyard, he had, a motive if I've ever seen one. A lot of the evidence against him was circumstantial, but the prosecution was confident that they could convince the jury of his guilt. Now, the defense really tried to deflect the blame onto, Joseph's other business associate, Dan Kavanagh, and they cited him, withdrawing money from the business and also getting into some arguments with Joseph in the lead up to the McStay family deaths. So for a bit of context, in the business, Joseph was previously buying water fountains from suppliers and then selling them online, and Dan was doing all of the technical side of things. And then eventually they brought Chase in, who was did all the trades sort of side of things, and so they were able to start making their own water fountains, which gave Chase and Joseph a chance to kind of kick Dan out of the business. And Joseph was actually planning on buying Dan out of the business, which Dan obviously wasn't happy about because he felt like he had helped build the business up to what it was, or, you know, helped really start the business and build the business. So there definitely was like a little motivation for Dan, but there was absolutely no evidence to point to Dan whatsoever, whereas on the other hand there's like a mountain of evidence against Chase and way more motive. So in the end the jury was convinced of Chase's guilt, and he was convicted of 4 counts of first-degree murder and was sentenced to life in prison for the murder of Joseph, and was handed the death penalty for the murders of Summer, Joseph Jr. and Gianni, and he is currently on death row in California. But that is everything. That's everything for this case. It's truly a heartbreaking one. I mean, an entire family lost their lives over some guy who couldn't handle his own finances, and no less, he killed somebody who had helped him out time and time again, who had cut his losses because he knew his friend was struggling financially, who had given so much to this guy, who had loaned this guy so much money to help him out. And in return, his entire family and his 3- and 4-year-old children are murdered in such a brutal and horrific way. And even after he murdered them, he pretended like he was helping with the investigation. He, you know, was obviously trying to throw police off in ways, and it's sociopathic, really. I don't even have a word. Like, it's just crazy to me that there are people out there who are that vile. Like, he clearly felt no remorse for his actions. But that is everything from me today. That's all for this case. I look forward to discussing in the comments with you guys as always. But I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and hopefully I will see you guys in my next video. Bye, guys.